We are located southwest of Rothsay, Minnesota, about 12 miles. Family farm with my dad. Have 2 boys also. We grow corn and soybeans. So what we have behind us is a drainage water management site. There's control structures, so we can control the water level in the soil through drain tile. So we can build that water level up for water conservation for later in the season, so it should be available to the crop that we have planted on there.
This particular field, we are demonstrating the practice called controlled drainage. And the equipment behind me is what we use both to manage the water as part of the controlled drainage, as well as monitor the impacts of the project we are demonstrating here. The project started in 2015, and that was when the drain tiles were installed. And then the following year, in 2016, we installed all the monitoring equipment. Controlled drainage as a practice has been around for many years, but we have not seen a lot of adoption of the practice. And one of the reasons might be that there is some lack of information about how it works, how to install it, and how to manage it. And so therefore, we wanted to install this practice as a demonstration site where we could both look at what does it take to install it, what is the additional cost, and how do you manage it. And then also to monitor the systems to kind of help show these are the benefits, not just in terms of yield, but also some of the environmental benefits that comes with this practice. The Red River Basin here in Minnesota is particularly well suited for the controlled drainage, the practice that we are demonstrating here, because of the landscape is generally flat, and that is particularly well suited for this particular practice. And that's one of the reasons that we chose to have this project here in the Red River Basin. Another reason is the Red River Basin is also the part of the state where we see most new drain tile being installed. And to allow for controlled drainage to function, the tile system has to be designed the right way before it is installed. And so therefore this is a great part of the state to do this demonstration so that new tile systems can be designed to accommodate controlled drainage. Controlled drainage is one amongst a number of different practices that a farmer can choose to install. And all of these different practices is what we call edge of field practices. And each practice does not work everywhere, but there will typically be one or more of the practices that will work for a particular situation on a particular farm. For situations where there's a field that is relatively flat, and especially in areas such as here in the Red River Basin where we receive relatively less rainfall compared to other parts of the state, that this is a really good practice, both because of the shape of the landscape, but also again for the opportunity to hold water back within the field so that we can carry some of that excess water we have in the spring forward for the crop to use later in the summer, later in the growing season. There is a concern both here in the Midwest, across the nation and across the world as well, related to the loss of nitrogen from agricultural fields, especially fields that has subsurface drainage or tile drains installed in them. And so we know from past research that there are different practices where we can manage the water in those subsurface drainage systems so that we can maintain the agronomic benefits of the drainage while at the same time reduce or minimize any negative environmental consequences. And so the particular practice that we are looking at in this field, that is what we call controlled drainage. And as part of this, we do have the ability to adjust the outlet elevation of the drainage systems. What that means is we can allow the water from the field to drain off the field during the times of the year where we need that water to drain off. But other times of the year where we do not need to drain the water, we can actually hold that water back within the soil. And by holding that water back, we are maintaining more water in that soil profile for the crop later in the growing season. We are also reducing the amount of nitrate that potentially could be lost with the tile drained water from the field. Working with Jared at this site has been very useful since he has been a great collaborator for this particular site. The site was chosen initially as a collaboration between the NRCS and Jared Nordick, and then the Minnesota Department of Agriculture got involved during the design phase. And what we were looking for a field was we wanted a field that was at the farm size, so the farm scale, to make sure that the results that we're getting are relevant at the scale that they would be installed. So this is a full 160-acre field, which we then divided into 3 sections. The northernmost section we left without any subsurface drainage. The middle section we left with what we call conventional drainage. What that means is the water is just draining freely off the field through the subsurface drains. And the southern section, we put in these drainage control structure where we can hold water back during different times of the year. The whole design phase and the work with the contractor installing the tile was done in a way so that we could have the conventional drainage and the controlled drainage running side by side and have that side-by-side comparison. The tile that's being installed here is standard plastic tile. The lateral lines are 4-inch PVC and the main lines are 6, 8 or 10-inch depending on where in the field they are. Jared has been farming this field the same way for a number of years. And so that gives us the ability to compare directly, side by side, what the impact and the benefits is of the controlled drainage compared to a conventional drainage system. And so the equipment that sits in the green boxes behind me is equipment that we use to collect information both about the amount of water that is leaving the field, as well as we can collect water samples of that water, and then we can take it to the lab and analyze it for nitrate concentration. And we are collecting flow data and water samples both from the conventional drain field as well as the controlled drain field. So the way controlled drainage work is that we can adjust the outlet elevation. What that means is we can use water control structures such as these gray boxes that are behind me, and they're connected directly on the main lines of the tile. And as the water flows through those boxes, we can inset baffles or weirs within a sliding mechanism within those boxes, so that the more boards we put in, we back water up behind where those boards are, just like a dam would do. And by adjusting or removing or inserting boards, we can either drain more water, that is if we remove the boards, or we can hold more water back, that is if we insert more boards. And so when we insert more boards and are holding water back, well then that water stays in the soil and it's not going anywhere until that water is either drained, that is if we lower the boards, or it is taken up by the crop.
Right now we're set at where we normally leave everything set at. We did pull a couple boards early planting season just to get rid of some more water because we've been really wet here in the Red River Valley. So we did drain down our profile a little more than normal, but now all the boards are back in and operating. So we had a tile pump is what it is, and it's just a float system in there that when it gets high enough, it pumps the water out. The extra water that overflows over the dam is, I guess, what I would call it in these control structures. Then it is released into the sump pump, and the sump pump brings it up and sucks it out, and then it goes through the drainage system. So this is the lift pump that will lift the drain water up and then pump it into the adjacent road ditch.
A lot of farmers are looking to see what they're losing through tile water. This research site is really telling us the story on what tile is doing to our soils. Are we able to soak up more water? Are we losing our valuable nutrients? Are we preventing erosion? And so sites like this really help to answer those questions. So here in these boxes are auto samplers, and these auto samplers collect water samples as the drainage comes through the tile lines before it hits the outlet. The water is pulled depending on the flow. And so with high flow events, the samplers will fill up in about 3 to 4 days. Otherwise, usually about once a week is when we're out here pulling samples. So the samples that we collect, we're checking for the TSS, or total suspended solids. That would be the sediments that's coming through the water lines. Then we are also testing for the total nitrogen, along with nitrates, and then orthophosphates. And the last one that they've recently added is the chloride. This is important because tile is a very big thing in the valley. We are flat, we don't have the hills, we don't have the slopes, and so tile is something that you see a lot of going in, and if we can learn what tile is doing, that's going to either advance our knowledge in future tiling projects, or that's going to show us what we can do to improve on the tiling project in the valley as it expands through the region. The data coming off here shows us the reduction in nitrates. It's really telling the story on what tile drainage is doing with runoff.
There are a lot of factors that impact how much nitrate that we're losing from a field. There are factors such as soil type, if it has a history of manure application, the rotation that's taking place, and also whether or not it has drain tiles in it. But in addition to that, it also is important how much organic matter there is in the soil and how much of nitrogen that might be stemming from the mineralization of that organic matter. An important factor at this particular site is that the soil is more of a sandy loam within the top 3.5 to 4 feet, and below that we run into some heavier clay. So that means that at a field like this, any excess water that we have in this field, most of it will run off along the surface. Because of that clay, there's less water that can percolate deeper into the soil. And so by having the drain tiles installed, we are creating a different avenue for that water, that excess water to leave the field. And that means instead of running off along the surface, now it moves down through the soil and then out through the drain tile. The good thing about that is that by reducing the amount of surface runoff, we're also reducing the amount of erosion that is taking place. So that is when water moves along the surface, it picks up soil particles and then carries it with it as it runs downstream. And there's typically quite a bit of the plant nutrient phosphorus attached to those soil particles. So by reducing the amount of surface runoff, we are keeping the soil in place, and we are keeping more of the phosphorus in place also in the field where it's needed for the crops to grow. The primary nutrient that we are monitoring for at this site is nitrogen in the form of nitrate, just because it is a nutrient that is water soluble. So if the water that is within the soil is moving somewhere, the nitrate moves with it. So that means that if the water is moving towards a plant root, for example, well, then the nitrate is moving towards the plant root, which is a good thing, because then the plant can take it up. But also if the water is moving towards a tile, then the nitrate moves with the water. But specifically because we are in the Red River Basin, the runoff water from here ends up in the Red River of the North, ends up in Lake Winnipeg. And because that is a freshwater lake, phosphorus is also a concern, since that is the nutrient that is responsible for much of the algae growth in Lake Winnipeg. So we're therefore also monitoring for phosphorus, both the total amount of phosphorus that is coming through the drain tiles, as well as the dissolved phosphorus that is in the drain tile. And the reason that especially dissolved phosphorus is of interest is that it has a very high bioavailability. That means that once it's in the water and ends up in Lake Winnipeg, that it is immediately available for the algae to take up. In addition to nitrogen and phosphorus, we are also monitoring for the amount of sediment, so that's in essence soil and other small particles that's coming out with the water. And this year we also started monitoring for chloride. We are very encouraged by the data that we're collecting from this site. Since we're rotating between corn and soybeans, the results varies a little bit depending on the particular crop that was in a given year, as well as just what the weather conditions were. But on average, across the rotations, we're seeing about a 20% reduction in flow of water leaving the field with controlled drainage compared to conventional drainage. In terms of water quality, we're also seeing about a 30% reduction in nitrate losses through the tile drains from the controlled drainage site compared to the conventional drainage site. And those numbers are really important for a couple of reasons. One is the reduction in flow. We are in the Red River Basin, which is prone to flooding, especially in the spring when we have spring snowmelt, especially if we also have some early spring rains. And with this system, we can hold more water back within the agricultural fields rather than it running off and kind of contributing to that flooding. And so therefore having that reduction in flow coming off the field is important. And in terms of water quality, the state has goals for the level of nitrate reduction coming off agricultural fields. And by showing that by using controlled drainage that we can reduce those losses by 30%, that makes this practice a very, very relevant practice that farmers can install. In addition to both the flooding and water quality issues, a third benefit, an agronomic benefit, is that especially during years where we might have too much water in the spring, which is common, but then run out of water later in the growing season, that by holding water back within the soil, there is more water available to the crop later in the growing season. So when, for example, a corn crop is tasseling and when it's really susceptible to water stress and to yield loss because of water stress, having a little bit extra water carry over can really make a difference. At this site, we are only monitoring the water quality and the quantity of the subsurface drainage water. We are not monitoring the surface runoff. What we are seeing is the amount of phosphorus that is in the subsurface drainage water is very low, but they are similar between the controlled drainage and the conventional drainage site. So from what we're seeing at this site, we're not seeing much of a difference in the phosphorus loss between those two practices. But by having the subsurface drainage tile installed, we're reducing the amount of surface runoff. We've seen data from other sites in the Red River Basin. It's not uncommon that it is between 75 to 90% of the phosphorus loss from a field is from surface runoff, and the rest is from subsurface runoff. So that means that by installing subsurface tile, we are greatly reducing the amount of phosphorus loss from the fields. Even though controlled drainage is effective in reducing the amount of nitrate that's leaving a field, it's not the only factor that has an influence. And so it should be seen as one of the tools we have in the toolbox, that it's in and of itself might not be enough to meet water quality goals. Other factors to consider is the amount of fertilizer that is being applied, so that if the amount of fertilizer that is being applied is in excess of the amount that the crop needs, well then that excess fertilizer, nitrogen, would have to go somewhere. And so it's not uncommon for us to see that if the amount of nitrogen fertilizer that is being applied is much higher than what the plant needs, well then we also see very high nitrate levels in the tile water. In this particular case, this field, the corn typically receives about 140 pounds of nitrogen from urea and about 40 pounds of phosphorus and 40 pounds of potash. And then there's about 5 gallons or so of liquid starter fertilizer. So that is very reasonable for the yields that Jared typically has in this field. So Jared, what are you seeing in terms of yield difference between the conventional and controlled drainage?
Yeah, it's been definitely, the controlled drainage has been better. To be able to hold that water back level, raise that up, 18 inches, it's 5 to 10% increase probably in the yield production versus the regular conventional drainage or the non-tiled drainage also. Our biggest benefit, getting rid of that excess water, it helps me in my pocketbook is what it does, is reinvesting into the land that we have. I would love to farm more dirt, but farming more dirt isn't always profitable. So to reinvest into the dirt that we have and do a better job is the biggest thing. Better plant health, time management. All of our tiled ground was the first stuff that we hit this spring because it was a wetter year. So we worked all of our tile ground about 5 days ahead of our non-tiled ground, and that's huge in a year like this, getting it in a timely manner. Anytime we have drain tile, unless we get a major rain event, we don't see a lot of runoff on drain tiled fields. We have some non-tiled stuff that we do have some surface erosion on, and that is a factor in it. So when we get to tile underneath it, I explain it's like a sponge. When the sponge is dry, we can absorb that water back up and then release it over time. Or if the sponge is already wet and you add more to it, that's where you're gonna have the runoff from.
And how much additional management has it been for you to manage the water and such?
Management side for me hasn't really been a lot, just some record keeping on yield management, trying to keep our yield goals, projections of fertilizer and where to be, and try to be stewards of the land, of not over applying. NRCS and local offices had actually come to me and asked me about doing this site to do some design and also help with funding on this location. As producers, we were also committed to put dollars to it to make it work out. Working with NRCS was very good. We have a good working relationship. We have good people in our local offices. I would recommend anybody working with NRCS. I guess I just tell everybody, reach out to them and ask. And if you don't try, you don't know.
We're super excited to be a partner in this project. We've worked with MDA over the past, also with NRCS, working in that office with them. They are a huge partner that we rely on a lot for their expertise in conservation. The list of partners goes on, but this is a big collaboration that takes a lot of people that come together and you create something so good that so many people can learn from.
So working with NRCS and all the collaboration of everybody involved, from the watershed to the local SWCDs, took a lot of time to get the designs right, get contractors lined up, get it installed right, and to get a finished product. I truly believe that it's been a great program.
And part of the reason it has been so successful is that it really is a partnership amongst a number of different organizations. First and foremost, of course, is Jared Nordick, the farmer, who has been a tremendous collaborator and has been really good at sharing information and accommodating any requests that we might have had to do this monitoring. But also other important partners is the NRCS that was involved early on, both with providing some of the funding, the design of the system, and just overall support throughout the duration of the project. It's also the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, which has acted as a lead on the monitoring side of the project, that has also provided both staff time and funding for the project. In addition to that, we have a number of other project partners, and they all listed on the project sign. And not only did they say we want to be part of it, they also all contributed to the project, either in terms of providing funding or materials. So everyone listed there has really put the money where their mouths were. Everyone came together and said, this is an important project. We are interested in the data that's being collected, and therefore we want to support it. This has been a very, very successful project that we've had, because we've been able to show that it's both a win for the farmer and for crop production, and it's a win for the environment.
We've done a Streambank restoration project on a creek that runs through our farm. We had some undermining erosion going on in there. So what we done is reached out to NRCS and asked for some help, and they gave us a blueprint pretty much and told us what we could do and find a contractor to do it and haul rock in and put a geotextile down to stop that erosion. So gave us a funding source to complete that and stop that erosion process. The site has really been a good site. Had some people come back and reevaluate it to make sure that it has been working right, and very impressed. It was a labor-intensive project. I done it myself. I also have an excavator company that I run, so me and my guys were able to do that. And to be able to put some sweat into it and do it and see the end result of how it worked, that was the biggest thing. It's a Streambank restoration project is what it is. We had some undercutting is what was happening with the water coming around the bends. Mainly high water flows is what was causing it. It was just, eroding out, and all that dirt goes downstream and ends up into the Red River of the North and heads to Winnipeg. So I guess we always felt as stewards of the land, we want to try to do what's right also. So we went to the local NRCS office and, what can we do, and can we get some help to do this? Because to buy rock and to do a system correctly with water flow, us as farmers don't always understand it. There's a sizing of a certain rock. They want some 18s and they want some 6 and 8s to fill the voids. Otherwise you're going to create other erosion from under the rocks also. So it's just mainly the Streambank is what we're trying to keep the erosion off of. There's a matting underneath this. That was probably the hardest project, to roll that out and staple that all in and get it tucked in and do it correctly and seed it and get all the rocks in place. Having that rock in there fills them voids, and with that mat underneath and a nice clay structure underneath, there's also some geotextile mat laid down in there that's all stapled down tight. So that water can't really get to the soil until it's up, 5-6 feet, and that's where we have a nice grass bank above that. So that's the main thing, is to keep that velocity of the water lower. It does dry up in the summer for maybe 2-3 weeks, but we will end up getting a rain usually about that time. So there is usually some low water flow all season long. I'm guessing we've probably done about 1,000 feet probably. The creek meanders through this mile, mainly on the south side because the water wants to go southwest, but there was one where the creek actually did bend back the other way. So we did do one on the north side after we got into it and seen it. We went back to the computer and they drew that up for us too, because we seen there was a problem there. So while we were doing it, it was the right thing to do. Was this effective with the erosion, doing the Streambank restoration project? Very, very successful in our opinion. We actually just signed up to do 2 more little ones west of here. If nobody shares their farm story, nobody knows. And that's kind of why I'm here, is I don't think I have everything figured out. I'm willing to learn, and by looking at these drainage management practices, why it's really opened up our eyes also. So gotta learn from one another.